Have you passed over a hidden treasure in Magic? Been resentful and regretful when you find out the card spiked years later in value? Finding the hidden treasures inside Magic the Gathering is not as hard as you'd think if you know where to look. Hi everyone and welcome back. MTG Moxman here, and thanks again for hanging out with me on the channel today. A shout out and thank you to everyone. I gotta be honest guys, we are less than 3,500 subscribers away from hitting that goal of 20,000 subs, and it's because of people like yourselves out there watching the videos and hitting the subscribe button. This is amazing. I just want to say thank you once again to everyone who's helping make this happen, from my regular viewers to new people finding the channel. Now for today's video, it is still part of my card watch series, the cards you should be paying attention to, but there is a reason behind it. When you look at value in cards, when you look at the crazy stuff going on, and the fact that Wizards of the Coast is going to reprint it, you know it, it's a fact, it's going to happen. Staying ahead of the curve and ditching your cards, getting some value out of them before they get reprinted has never been more important. And that's a little harder to track in the MTG finance world, but there are indicators. It's finding the card though that can be the hardest thing. For a quick bite of information, I used to buy a lot of bulk, and there was a card, Mana Morphos. The one was like one green, one red, and it gave you 2 mana plus you drew a card, right? I think most of you guys remember. I think it's Lorwyn block somewhere back then. I got a bulk from somebody where it had hundreds and hundreds of copies of it. I didn't need all the bulk, so I ended up throwing a lot of it away. And yes, I threw that card away. Now, looking back, I guess a couple of years later, that card spiked up to $20-something. I could have had tens of thousands of dollars, but I didn't know the signs, and I wasn't really into what we know now as MTG finance and paying attention to the little hints and curves that go along with sets. Ever since then, I've been much more careful, diligent, and investigated where card concepts could be coming down the pipeline. So some of the cards I'm going to share with you today may seem a little redundant. You might not quite know why I'm showing them. I'm going to explain it to you as we go through. These cards don't have to be expensive. Finding a hidden treasure to play with, finding a treasure you can speculate on, or just finding a decent card to fulfill a purpose inside a deck, everyone's got their rhymes and reasons for looking for cards inside this game. It's funny when you look at it from a longer term scope, more than 5-10 years. When you've been at it as long as I have, you do see a lot going on. And yeah, you've missed tons of opportunities, but other opportunities do come along. You don't overthink it. You learn from past mistakes and get better at it. And that's what most people kind of tend to forget. They overcompensate. So let's take a look at some cards. Let's see what I'm talking about here. And yeah, thanks again, once again, everyone. If you're new to the channel, you hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Our first card for looking for hidden treasures is, we're going to show you Sunbaked Canyon. This has only been printed in Modern Horizons. Now, that's bad for all of us out there who are thinking about buying this card, and allow me to explain. When you look at Sunbaked Canyon, this card says pay 1 life to add either red or white to your mana pool. So it's kind of like a slightly more isolated form of a card like City of Brass, where you take a damage for any color. This is a little more isolated, gives only 2 colors, but it is an option. It's available. Now you can sacrifice Sunbaked Canyon and draw a card by tapping 1 and of course tapping the land to draw a card. So it can serve a great utilitarian purpose later on when you get a top draw or get ahead. Now, the bad news for people looking at this card, and this is why you shouldn't be watching this one. This is not a hidden treasure. This has been out for a number of years already, okay? It's coming up on 4 and 5 years. This is going to get reprinted. This is going to come around far too soon for players to capitalize on it. And smart people already know this, because you can see there's a bit of a dip already in the valley. You can see, the market's bringing it down a little bit. There's other better utilitarian cards available for mana base. And a card like this, although it can help in a red-white deck, and you add a City of Brass, and you add your command tower, you're trying to filter your mana to a certain level, there are other options available that cost a lot less than this card. There are other better cards available, and I love these lands when they came out. I have a whole selection of them that I do play and use, but I didn't have to buy any. I got them from my initial packs, and I've never bought them since. I did trade some in when they were over that $20 mark, but there's been a slight decline ever since things like Triumphs have hit the battlefield, as well as Pathways. Keep that stuff in mind. The variation of options that Wizards of the Coast gives us lends things to a difference of opinion of playability. Now, our next card. This is Prismatic Vista. Now, this has been reprinted. We've already had a little bit. This is the Modern Horizons version. Look at the value and look at the dipping. A lot of players are already speculating that cards like this are going to arrive inside Commander Masters. And you're probably betting on a safe bet. Wizards of the Coast may still make it a rare. They may put a little bit lower on the track printing, so it's a little bit harder to get, but they want this card to come around again. They recognize the IP value, and they want it available for players. They realize it's a popular card mechanic to have. This is something they want to be able to use to pay one life, sacrifice, and search for a basic land card is something players have to utilize inside Commander. So this is a card players are going to want to get their hands on. You're eager. You're anticipating cards like this, and you're not wrong. Chances are it's going to get a reprint. This card definitely should not be 20 bucks. Let it fall. Do not buy the card. Don't go buy it at your store. Maybe if you want to trade in for one or something, I understand that. But even then, you're trading in at 50% losses nowadays. So keep that in mind. The value shaving of your collection by stores and everyone else, it's always there. You got to protect your value as much as you can, which means sometimes not doing anything. Guys, let's check out our next card. This is Academy Ruins, okay? Time Spiral. Now, when you see this card and you see, hey, it's massively dropped, that's because of the reprinting. But you'll notice since 2021 where it dropped, it had a slow recovery. Chances are this card is not getting reprinted anytime soon. It's going to have a larger breadth of room to grow. Now, when you look at this card and see if it's good or not, I think this is an excellent card. It's a legendary land. When it comes into, oh, I put the wrong version, by the way. I know I put Time Spiral, and this is the Double Masters one. You get where I'm going with this. One blue, one other. Put a target artifact from your graveyard on top of your library. Think about what we've seen with the Brothers' War, with the availability and concepts of artifacts and artifact construction, things that have tokens and counters on them. Cards like Academy Ruins are going to have a future use. Buying this card now, if you can get it low enough, probably makes some financial sense if you're going to hold on to the card to play for yourself. If you're trying to speculate on a card like this, the window will probably be pretty small. If this card climbs above the $20 mark, it's kind of in that IP room again where Wizards goes, hey, we can reprint this and cash out a little bit of equity. So keep that in mind. If you're going to try speculate, you're going to have a place to move the cards, and you have to see how popular this card becomes because not everyone's playing the same formats at the same time or playing the most popular decks. And that's an interesting thing to follow through on because when we look at these cards, things like Vault of the Archangel here, okay? This card, not a super expensive card, $1.99, Dark Ascension, but look what the card does. I want you to think for a second. With all the knights and soldiers and things we've seen, and you see a black and white, fits in perfectly with the mana pool for a lot of these soldiers. Okay, if not them, think about Phyrexians. It's got 2 tap, creatures you control gain Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. And the thing can tap for colorless. It fits in all kinds of crazy decks. Yes, it's been reprinted. This thing's been around for a while, okay? The version I'm showing you here versus the one that's on the screen, it's okay. I'm choosing the wrong ones. I don't care. I'm trying to get the point across that a card like this, they're going to try to keep the value down because it has great purpose to it. It can fit into a lot of decks, and you don't see it played as often as you might think you would. And if players start really trying to utilize more tribal decks that have these color combinations, cards like this will start getting snapped up, and Wizards will probably recognize the value and try to shift it into a reprint set where they can make some real money instead of sliding into Commander decks. Just an idea that I think they've been playing with for a while to see how things recover in the secondary market over different time periods. Now our next card, Otowara Soaring City. We all joke, I know, you've been on the channel for a while. You know I bought this card, a whole bunch of them at like $4 at release. Nobody seemed to recognize what this card could do. Now, I didn't keep those cards. I did trade them in for reserve list stuff. But let's take a look at Otowara and remember what this card does and what it is. Yes, it's going to get reprinted. It's going to come around again, absolutely. But there's a bit of a window here because this set is still fairly new. When you look at Otowara the Soaring City, that channel ability, along with the last little bit where it costs a little bit less for every legendary creature, and the fact we've been seeing more and more legendary creature deck construction ideas flowing from Wizards of the Coast means cards like this are going to have future value. Keep this stuff at the top of your head when you're looking for those hidden treasures and gems that might have higher trade-in value. There's a reason I'm showing you guys a lot of land. It starts with your mana base. Players have to have good mana to advance the rest of their conceptual ideas for deck construction. amazing stuff, but you gotta, I mean, it's the place I always look to first. Now, Rivendell is a brand new card. This is Lord of the Rings. It hasn't even officially released by the time you've watched this video, but this card deserves to be watched because the fact that it comes into play tapped unless you control a legendary creature is one thing. But when I look at this card and see it's 1 blue, right? You just tap for 1 blue, typical land, but it has that added ability of 1 blue, 1 other, scry 2. Activate only if you control a legendary creature. Think of all the low-level casting cost legendary creatures we know now. Think about the ideas of cards like Soldevi Excavations, which does the similar thing. And of course, things like Castle Vantress, which cost twice as much, costs 4 mana to use it plus tapping it, but it doesn't have the drawback of having legendary. It shows that Wizard of the Coast is tinkering with ideas like this. Is this a super expensive card? Absolutely not. It's going to be $1 to $2 bulk type of card. But if players find a way to utilize this later with lower casting cost legendary creatures, ways of bringing the land back, ways of utilizing the scry ability to stack up their decks and get certain things going in their ideas to get their play happening, this is something you really can't ignore. So a card like that could be more desirable down the road, especially in original printings, because chances are they don't have the rights to actually use the names and stuff later on. So keep that in mind too, because there'll be collectors out there who may pay attention to this stuff 10, 15 years from now. Now the next card, and the last one I'm sharing with you before we just get to see my ugly mug again, is the Gray Heavens Borderless, okay? Now, this card, I just think, I know it's like less than $1. It's a 40-cent card, but the fact it doesn't come into play tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to scry, and there are ways of bouncing this land, getting rid of it, bringing it back. This is something to pay attention to. Being able to scry multiple times in a turn, finding ways to unsummon your lands and bring them back again, killing them and bringing them back. This thing, the multiple scry ability you could do to cycle your deck is really noteworthy for an uncommon card. If this thing was marked at Mythic, I wouldn't have been surprised, just because of what it does. So a card like this right now, and the fact it can add any color for a legendary creature in your graveyard, it's something to pay attention to. It's just like I like the Bibuloplex. It may not have uses yet, but it may further down the road, right? Cards like Castle Dracula, all these kind of unique mana-based ideas Wizards puts out. You never know where a card's going to connect. You never know when that card's going to hit it big and spike up in value. And if you're a person who was looking ahead and had that idea, had the forethought to buy 8 copies for 30 cents each and say, what's $2? I can slide it into my trade stuff and leave it in the table there. Cost me less than a coffee. That's the kind of stuff that a year from now, 5 years from now, you look back, you're like, hey, this card spiked up. I have some of those. I marked that off on my spreadsheet. You go over there, you go, oh, I just made $50. I can go trade that in and work toward a bigger card, work towards something that you really wanted to get your hands on. It was really expensive, and realizing it took you 30-cent cards to make it, or a $1 card here and a $1 card there. The mana base is something you should always be paying attention to and looking for. In a hidden treasure gem, any good set is going to have good mana. The base of land inside that set will carry the value forward, and that's what you have to look. It's the first thing you look for. You can look for a big beastie creature. They're great. They're amazing. But they're no good if you can't cast them. And the more Wizards tinkers with these ideas, the more refined people's decks can become. And the mana fixing and the deck construction to shuffle certain cards in a certain way becomes easier to do. Pay attention to it, guys. It's crazy stuff out there. You got some amazing cards for me? You got some ideas you think I'm missing out on? Lay it on me. This is the place where magic conversation happens. Guys, I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow for another great video. I'm going to go have some nachos and cheese and clean up, the face now. All right? Have a great one, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. And of course, that big shout out and thank you to the fantastic people of this channel, the patrons who make it happen, guys. Thanks again to each and every one of you. These are the ones who make it happen each and every day. They allow for this content to be created by supporting the channel. Thanks again, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. We meet again. Welcome back. Guys, it is an interesting day when you can look at all these amazing cards. And we had nothing like this back in the day. We had things like Soldevi Excavation, but got to have a Soldevi in there. As well as, maybe the Necronomicon Ex Mortis. The Book of the Dead? That'd be a great idea for a set. I'm telling you, the Army of Darkness. But I look at the mana base now, and I go, do you have any ideas I can throw in there to try to make crazy connections? And that's fun. And fun is part of the game, and that's what I think people miss out on sometimes. They're always looking, this card's so expensive. This card is like A $50 card, only until they reprint it. And that 30-cent card could spike up to $5, but if you had 100 copies of it, you just made $5,000, didn't you? Sometimes it just blows my mind what people find value in. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being here. I know there's only a few of you who make it this far, but I'm glad you're here. I'm glad.